Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really profound, maybe even a bit uncomfortable. It's about Carl Jung and what some call his one rule for real authenticity. Just imagine for a second a version of yourself you haven't actually met yet. Someone free from all the expectations, the math. Jung thought meeting that self took this single radical commit, but he also warned most of us are probably, in his words, too weak for it.
Yeah, it's a challenging idea right from the start. He wasn't offering easy answers. Jung's work, it really invites us to live differently, doesn't it? By facing the deepest parts of who we are and maybe who we've been told to be.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack what's it really asks, why is it so incredibly hard, and what happens if we ignore it? Because there are consequences, often hidden. We think these insights could really shift how you self, your relationships, maybe even the world. And stick with us because the final point we'll get. It's one of those things you can't really unhear.
Okay, so let's dive in. Jung's starting point, his core idea, was that most people are essentially living asleep.
Asleep? How so?
Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually asleep. He saw people carrying identities that weren't truly theirs. Fulfilling expectations they never consciously chose. Just sort of going through the motions.
Like performing a role instead of living a life. That's quite a stark image.
It is. And out of that observation comes the rule itself. Brutally simple. You must become your authentic self, even if it costs you everything you have.
Okay. Sounds simple enough on the surface. Be yourself.
Right. But the real challenge, the difficulty Jung pointed to, isn't understanding the words. It's finding the raw courage to actually live by them, day in, day out.
And that living it out, that's what he called individuation.
Exactly. And it's not just like self-help tweaking. He described it as this often painful, lifelong journey. It's about bringing together your conscious self with all the hidden stuff in your unconscious, the uncomfortable bits.
Confronting your shadow, as he put it. Admitting truths about yourself that your ego really doesn't want to hear.
Precisely. It's a kind of descent you have to make before you can ascend. And this is where that idea of weakness really hits home.
How so?
Because following this path means giving up that false sense of safety we get from pleasing, from fitting in, from following the script society hands us. Jung knew this process literally shatters the image you have of yourself. And for the ego, that's terrifying, utterly terrifying.
It makes sense. I mean, think about it personally, right? Have you ever acted in a way you knew was fake, just to avoid a fight or, to be liked, or stayed silent when you desperately wanted to speak out, smiled when you felt like screaming, or disagreed when your gut was screaming no?
Yeah, those moments. Jung would say that's a betrayal, not just of the moment, but of your authentic self.
And the cost of choosing differently, of being authentic in those moments, it can feel, you risk losing relationships, maybe job opportunities, you risk losing the identity you've built up over years, losing respect from people who, frankly, preferred the easier, more convenient version.
It's a massive risk, but, and this is crucial for Jung, it's the only way to build a life that feels truly meaningful.
Yeah.
And this connects to what he said about the collective, about society. He warned, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you.
Oof, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So if you don't define yourself,
then society, the collective, will do it for you.
Yeah.
And you end up living a life that isn't really yours. Following Jung's rule means being willing to stand apart, to face potentially profound isolation.
And a big part of that standing apart involves facing the shadow. What exactly did he mean by that? It sounds dark.
It can be, but it's more complex. The shadow is like this hidden reservoir inside it. It was everything we refuse to see or acknowledge about ourselves. Our impulses, our desires, our flaws, but also the truth we find unacceptable.
Okay, the negative stuff.
Yes, but here's the kick, the bit people often miss. The shadow also holds our unrealized potential, our hidden talents, our suppressed strengths. These are vital parts of us we bury, maybe because we're scared they'll make us unlovable or get us rejected. But they're key to our wholeness.
So it's not just negativity, it's untapped positive aspect.
Absolutely. And Jung had this really striking phrase, until you make the shadow conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate.
Wow. So the things we refuse to see are actually driving our lives.
In a way, yes. Think of it like a locked box inside. You avoid opening it, but the content, they're still in there. They leak out. They influence your choices, your emotions, your relationships, often in ways that seem random or like bad luck. Those sudden bursts of irrational anger, that intense jealousy that comes out of nowhere, that defensiveness, often that's your shadow trying to get your attention.
That really challenges the way we tend to see ourselves, doesn't it? Like most of us think we're generally good people because we avoid doing bad things.
Right, but Jung saw that as repression, not genuine good. He actually argued that people who believe they are purely good can be the most dangerous.
Why?
Because they're blind to their own capacity for darkness, for harm. Denying your shadow doesn't make it vanish. It just pushes it underground where it can fester and erupt destructively later on.
So facing the shadow isn't about becoming a worse person.
Not at all. It's about becoming complete, whole. Think about it visually. Light needs shadow to create depth and form. A purely lit landscape is flat. This work demands taking really full, radical responsibility for your life. No more blaming your parents, your circumstances, the world, your enemies.
You have to admit that a lot of your own suffering
Yeah, and that, Jung believed, is the point where most people falter. That's the weak. It's terrifying to let go of those external blames, those protective stories.
But if you do manage to face
Then something extraordinary starts to happen. You begin to see patterns you never saw before. You understand why you made certain choices, why you attracted certain people or situations. The chaos in your outer life starts to reflect the integration happening within. It begins to make sense. Like Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
a descent before an ascent, meeting those despised parts of yourself.
And learning to see them not as enemies to be defeated, but as allies to be integrated into your whole self. Without that shadow work, Jung thought any self-improvement is just cosmetic, superficial.
Okay, so how does someone even begin this? It sounds overwhelming.
It can feel that way. Jung suggested starting by paying really close attention to your reaction. What really pushes your buttons in other people, what irritates you intensely. Often that's a projection, an unacknowledged part of your shadow that you're seeing in them. Also, notice what you envy.
Envy. Why envy?
Envy can point towards your own suppressed potential, desires you haven't dared to claim. And finally, just notice those moments when you feel that strong urge to hide who you are, to put on a mask. That's your shadow.
Okay. But this isn't just an internal battle, right? You mentioned society.
Absolutely. Critical point.
Yeah.
Jung was very clear. Society itself will resist your individuation profoundly. Society fundamentally doesn't want you to be whole and unique. It wants you to be predictable, manageable. And that makes following this rule even harder.
Why does society want predictability over wholeness?
Well, think about it. From the moment we're born, we're trained to adapt. Family, school, work, culture. They all have rules, spoken and unspoken. They reward fitting in, complying. They often punish, subtly or not so subtly, deviation. We learn very quickly which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which need to be hidden away.
So we end up performing roles again.
Exactly. Many people spend their entire lives performing a role assigned by the collective rather than living authentically from their core. The collective thrives on that sameness. It keeps the systems running smoothly. So a person who genuinely thinks for themselves, who acts from their own authentic center, that person is a threat to the stability of the system.
So trying to live by Jung's rule feels like a rebellion.
It absolutely can. You're basically saying, I'm not playing this assigned part anymore. And there's a price for that rebellion. You might lose approval. People might call you difficult or selfish or just plain weird. You could get excluded from groups you used to belong to.
That sounds like a heavy price.
It is. But Jung's would argue the real cost, the unbearable cost, is paid by those who conform. They pay with their soul, with the life they never live. Imagine getting to the end and realizing you never actually met yourself. You only ever knew the version of you that other people needed or expect. That's the real tragedy he wanted us to avoid.
And these pressures to conform, they're not always obvious, are they?
No, often very subtle. In the workplace, maybe innovation is praised, but only if it fits the company's current direction. In friendships, people get used to you being a certain way, and when you change, it can be met with suspicion. Families have deep patterns, and stepping outside them can feel like a betrayal. And then there's the media constantly showing us who we should be, what we should want.
So Jung is challenging us to constantly question.
Yes, to ask, are my beliefs really mine, or did I just absorb them? Do I think this way because I explored it, or just because it was easier? This kind of questioning is seen as dangerous because it starts to dismantle the comfortable illusions that keep everything, ticking along smoothly.
So breaking free, it leads to freedom, but also maybe loneliness.
That's the paradox, exactly. You become freer because you're living your truth. But you can also become lonelier because, frankly, not everyone is ready or willing to meet you there in that authentic space. Jung never promised happiness would be the result. He actually predicted internal conflict, external conflict, but he saw that conflict as a sign of life, a sign that you're actually engaged with reality. Growth needs friction. Truth often demands sacrifice.
And what about the danger of not following, of staying?
It's not just about remaining incomplete, though that's part of it. Jung believed the parts of yourself you refuse to live out, they don't just disappear, they turn against. That unexpressed passion might curdle into resentment. Ignored creativity can become self-destructive behavior. Unspoken truths might even manifest as illness, physical or emotional. The psyche, he insisted, just doesn't tolerate dishonesty in the long run. It will force the truth out somehow.
Which leads us to maybe the toughest part of this whole idea, the ultimate implication.
Yeah, this is where it gets really challenging. To fully live this rule, Jung suggests you might actually have to destroy the life you've already built.
Destroy it. That sounds extreme.
It feels extreme, but think about it. You can't stay who you are now and become the person you're truly meant to be. There are different states of being. Something has to give way. Something has to die for the new self to be born. The process of individuation often involves dismantling the foundations of your current life, the relationships, the career, the identity, the habits that were built to support the false self, the mask.
So when you stop feeding that old self, things fall apart.
Often. Yes, the structures that relied on that old self can start to crumble. It feels like loss, and in many ways it is loss. You might lose friends who only like the mask. You might walk away from a successful career that just doesn't align with your core anymore. Your entire belief system might undergo a radical shift.
But there's a gain in that loss.
That's the paradox Jung points to. What you lose in external comfort, you gain in internal truth. You trade that false stability for genuine freedom. You stop chasing applause and start living for alignment with your deepest self.
It sounds like a very lonely road, though.
It often is. But Jung would say it's the only road that allows you to fully meet, not the image, not the role, but the actual living truth of who you are. He saw most people shrink back from this precisely because they fear the chaos of tearing down their old life.
But isn't there chaos in not to?
Exactly. Jung warned about a different kind of chaos, the quiet internal turmoil of a life unlived. That sort of quiet desperation, the nagging feeling you're meant for more but didn't have the courage, that's its own kind of hell.
So how do you find the strength if it's this hard, this scary?
Well, first, you have to understand that fear is part of it. It doesn't go away. You learn to act despite the fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in its presence. Second, pain isn't the enemy. Pain is often the signal that growth is occurring, that old limitations are breaking down. And third, this is maybe the most crucial step. You have to decide deep down that truth matters more to you than anything else. More than approval, more than comfort, more than security.
That decision, that's the real turning point.
It's everything. Once truth becomes your highest value, you stop negotiating. You stop compromising your authenticity. You stop asking other people for permission to be who you are. You just are.
Okay. And that leads us to that final, maybe unsettling insight you mentioned earlier.
Yes, it's this. When you truly embrace your authentic self, when you individuate, you might find you never fully belong anywhere again.
Never belong anywhere.
Not in the way you used to. Not completely to the crowd, not neatly within the systems, maybe not even within those smaller circles that once felt like home, because you're no longer defined by them. This, Jung suggested, is the ultimate price of this kind of freedom. You essentially exchange belonging for becoming.
That's a stark trade-off.
It is, but Jung didn't see it as a curse. He saw it as the natural state of someone who has truly stepped outside the collective herd mentality. You're an individual now. Your path is unique. You have your own inner compass, and you follow that, even if it means walking alone sometimes.
Yeah.
It's your path, authentically yours.
So recapping this, Jung's rule sounds simple, but living it demands giving up the comfort of what we know for the maybe terrifying uncertainty of what's real. It means dropping the act, stepping into the raw, maybe messy truth of who you are.
Yeah.
So the real question we leave you with is, will you take that step? Are you willing to open that locked box inside, to meet your shadow, challenge the expectations, and maybe risk the life you have now, all for the chance to meet the person you were always meant to be?
Jung called it the privilege of a life, to become who you truly are. A powerful idea. But it's crucial to remember, privilege isn't the same as ease. It demands everything. And if you're thinking maybe later, consider this. Postponing individuation is postponing your life. Every day you wait, that mask gets just a little bit tighter. The connection to your true self gets fainter. There's really no perfect time to start.
It makes you question everything, doesn't it? Like, what kind of success is it really? If it costs you your soul, what kind of love can it be if it's only for a version of you that isn't even real?
These are the hard questions Jung forces us to confront.
The journey clearly is tough. No sugarcoating that. But the promise, if you stick with it, isn't necessarily an easy life, but maybe a kind of profound peace that comes from wholeness, from knowing deep down that you're finally living as yourself.
That unshakable knowing. That's the reward.
The world will constant that. Jung's rule, deep personal challenge to that question. Regardless, so the final thought is just that. And